Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr.
And I'm Beth Ellicott.
And you're listening to Fiber Talk, the twice weekly podcast for the needlework artists. Our artist this week, Robin-Ann Rossignol. Robin, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for doing this with us. This is gonna be a little different. Robin is not your traditional designer. I don't even know if you do all that much designing at all, but extensive stitching experience. And so we decided we're going to do a show, and we're just going to talk about different aspects of stitching and learn from Robin and throw out some tips and ideas and practices. And just have some fun talking about needlework. So if you're listening, it might be good to get a pen and paper out because you might want to make a note or two. And based on our conversation before the show, you also might want to sit on the credit card because it may cost you $1 or $2. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I've already started taking notes. So
yeah, Beth's already spent some money, and we hadn't even started recording. So
it's bad. It's bad.
So the topic before we start. So Robin, thank you for doing this. The topic before we started was we got into the linen thing and quality of linen and over dyes. And what were you saying, Beth, about who was that?
He stitched me. It was
yes.
The last thing we talked about. We were looking at their fabrics, and I have a piece of gingerbread that's 40 count, and it's gorgeous. But you were thinking you'd like it if it were not so modeled.
Right.
But I think the problem with getting something on 40 count is that if you're going to do a sampler that has what they call, the specialty stitches in it, they disappear on the 40 count. You can't see them. And Robin, you were discussing that it needed like a 28 count. Wouldn't you say?
28 to 32.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
for it to work,
you just lose them. Don't you think?
Yes. And where I love doing mixed technique samplers, so sometimes I'll have blackwork bands, heart hanger bands, filet lace, reticella. I've got one right now that's going to have some reticella in it, or filet lace. I haven't decided which way I want to go. You need a certain size so you can have the details show.
I so much agree, because I know I did a little piece where I did a tiny little hem stitch, and it was on 45 count, and you can't see it. I mean, and I pulled out several threads to get the hem stitch in and have that that little piece of thread there, so you could kind of see, so it kind of looks lacy on the edge was the idea. But what a pain on the 45 count. It would have been so much nicer. It would have looked so much prettier, I think, on a 32 count, where you could really see the hem stitch work that I had done.
Now, see, that's an interesting thing, because when it comes to cross stitch, I just buy 40 count blindly. I'll stitch on higher most of the time. I really don't want to stitch on anything lower, because 40 count I like, and I like to just use one strand. But all right, so I got those 3 sampler charts from the sampler, which are mixed stitches and all kinds of things. Now, normally I would just buy 40 count and go for it, but that's interesting. Now I've got to take a look at those and see if by going at 40 count, then I am sacrificing the visual detail that is in that chart. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think so, because if you're going to pull threads out, I think you have to pull more to get that visual look. I know Mabel Took, which has queen stitches in it, people were stitching it on 40 count, and Kim was saying it would have, that's pretty, but you're going to lose that queen stitch, which is I think is a pretty stitch when it's stitched up. I mean, you can do it on 40 count. I've done the queen stitch on 40 count, but I think it gives a better visual impact if you do it on a slightly lower count linen. So, 32 count. would be nice. I don't know. I agree with you though. I like stitching with just one thread. So that's why I like the 40 count and the 37 count.
Okay, so I can see that, because a queen stitch at 40 count, even with a single strand, it just gets all jumbled up. It's just a lump sitting there because you can't get spacing in the interior of the stitch.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah. And that's also the issue when you're doing drawn thread work or hem stitching. A hem stitched band, especially if there's a filler in that band, on these smaller counts, you lose your detail. You lose what makes that band interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I never really had thought about that before, and I've done band samplers that have like that hem stitch where, I don't know what it's called, where you twist the middle threads, so it kind of, and sometimes if you even put a bead in there. Well, you wouldn't really be able to do that on a 40, 45 count. I mean, I guess you could, but you really would lose all that because it'd be such a small area. You'd have to make it bigger so it has a visual, withdraw more threads so you could see it.
And on the 40 count, even using a petite bead might be too big.
Right. And
you
they only
lose
make
your proportions.
Right. And they only make the beads so small anymore. So,
True.
Which is so sad.
Yeah. Okay. This is opening my mind a little bit, because I just blindly buy, like I said, and don't even think about it. But okay, now with these charts coming, I got to take a look. So then, all right. So Cindy, or not Cindy, but Robin. Sorry. Then what's your experience, Congress cloth versus, say, 18 count canvas?
It depends on what I'm doing, and if I'm being lazy. The thing with Congress cloth is you have to remember, especially if you're taking an existing pattern and it calls for things that are equivalent to a size 5 pearl cotton, that's going to be a little bulky on your Congress cloth. So you'll need to look at size 8s and for some things size 12. When I say lazy, I don't like to lay threads. I will do it, and I know how to do it. But multiple strands, if I can get away with using a single strand or switching to a thread that I can use a single strand and achieve the same effect, that's what I do.
Yeah.
It's easier to lay on Congress cloth because you don't need as many strands to get coverage, so you get a smoother look.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't think of that. That is a great point. We're getting ready to do EGA's, I think it's called Shimmering Dreams. It's their EGA group correspondence course. And people are looking at using 18 count because they think it is. It's easy to find 18 count canvas. Mm-hmm. They were kind of wondering how hard it'd be to find the right color of Congress cloth. But I think I'm going to send a note out saying, hey, you'll have to lay fewer threads. And one of the gals who's doing this hasn't done a lot of needlepoint. So this is all a new experience for her. And so the fewer threads she has to lay, the happier she may be, because it does, that's part of the, what you're learning how to shade using silks. So you need a strandable. You can't use a single thread. You're going to need something that's strandable, a cotton or silk. Oh.
In my A&G chapter, we did summer fireworks 2 years ago, and now we're doing autumn fireworks. I don't remember the designer, but they were free patterns. It's a woman in Australia. And she specifically said Congress cloth. And it was just much easier to get beautiful coverage with 3 strands. And on some of her diagonal stitches, 2 strands of silk, overdyed silk, were sufficient. And there you don't even need a laying tool. You can railroad them.
Right.
Yeah. And that's good to keep in mind when you're changing something up, because this design obviously can be done on 18 count if you want to, but you're right. You have to use more strands of floss, and the more strands you put in, the more carefully you have to lay them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think people give a lot of thought other than color to the ground cloth in relation to their design. I want that color, and the threads are going to show up on it well, or that was just specified, and so that's what I'm going with. But now we've got personal preference and type of stitches and how they're going to show become, I think, even more of a factor than just this is what I like. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we got to start with a ground cloth. So there's several decisions to be made with the ground cloth, and then now I was just putting together threads to do the Botany Bay sampler, and had Kim at Sassy Jacks had put together a list of Cosmo threads, and there's some DMC, but that was the next step for me. Was, all right, I get all these threads organized. Are they going to show up on the ground cloth? And I identified 3 that don't. It looks like it's going to be a problem, but you really can't tell until you stitch them. So now I've got 3. I've got a little note there that says, when we get to these 3 colors to check, because it's and that gets into this whole discussion of color. And will they stand out from the ground cloth? Will they stand out more than you want them to? Do you kind of want them to blend in? And then how do they look stitched versus on the skein versus how do they look stitched next to each other? And, those are all decisions that a lot of times a designer will make if you're just going to execute what the designer put together. But, sometimes I think even that needs to be evaluated.
You're right on that, because I'm stitching a Debbie Rowley piece called Fun Stuff. And I had a lot of the threads that she called for, so I was able to pull them and really get a feel for her shades and her color families. But I changed the overdyed, and I changed because of that, the color families changed. So when you change colors or you think something isn't going to show up, yes, you have to, where is it used? How is it used? What are the colors it's next to? Some of yours that you think will disappear because of the fabric may be fine because they're surrounded by something else.
Yes, right.
So in changing a piece, especially for counted canvas work, I spend a fair amount of time studying the pattern and looking at placement and what is it. And there's a square that I've done in there that I like the colors I use. I don't like the weight of thread. So I'm going to order the size 8 pearl cotton instead of the 5 size that she was using. Mm-hmm. It's too bulky and clunky, I think.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And that's why I said on this sampler that I just identified these 3 colors, because just laying the skeins on the ground cloth, it didn't look like they were going to show up. But yeah, I've had that. We've all had that experience where it may be close to what the ground cloth is, but where it's stitched and what it's surrounded, maybe it's just enough color, but then it adds the texture in that area that you need. So you leave it alone. And yeah, you have to make those calls on the fly, I think, or well, yeah, I mean, I do for me. That's, now let me evaluate this, and no, this isn't going to work. I'll change it. But yeah, now thickness of thread is another thing. This is where for me it gets fun, because there's a lot of decisions to be made beyond just simply how am I going to do the stitch.
And I find on counted canvas, I like a more open, lacy look. I am not afraid to have that canvas show. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I will intentionally go to a smaller thread. Use less strands. I find I do that a lot because I understand a lot of the stitches. And there was a piece I worked recently where she was having you use 4 strands of silk or cotton, and it was a diagonal stitch. And even on 18 count, you don't need 4 strands to give you good coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So I dropped it down to 3.
Yeah.
Not only does it save thread, but 3 is a lot, as we said earlier, 3 is a lot easier to handle.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Easy to play and get them smooth, if that's what you're trying to do. Yeah. And sometimes, depending on your tension, you might have to bulk up. Some people, and they're, had the comment that, it says only use 3 strands, but I don't like how it looks. So add a 4th strand. It's not going to make or break you if you add an extra one. Get it so you like how it looks. Or like you were doing, you were going down a size on the pearl cotton. So maybe someone's got a really thin pearl cotton and you want it bulkier, go up a size. That's an easy fix, really.
And this is one of the things when I teach, as well as just in talking to my friends who stitch. Remember, it's your piece. Do you like it? Right. And if you don't like it, change it. Once you buy that pattern, it's not the designer's property anymore. And I have run into designers who have issues with this. They don't want you making any changes to their pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are others like Debbie Rowley who says, it's yours. How do you see this? What's your vision for this piece? And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about doing a painted canvas. Once you buy the canvas, what stitches you use and threads are up to you. What's your vision for this piece?
Yeah. For so many, that's a hard hurdle to get over. They almost feel an obligation to execute what the designer put down, and I don't know what the psychology of that is, but I think some people feel like I'm going to get in trouble if I show this and I changed it, and no, you're not. Even if the designer gets upset, too bad. It's your piece, it's your time, your stitching, your threads, your money. Do it the way you like it. Yeah.
But don't you also think
I started changing things with band samplers because they're the easiest to change. And I'm looking at a piece right now that there was a band in it of that I didn't like, and I went and found a blackwork pattern of pomegranates and grapes, and that's what I stitched as that band instead. That's the other thing. You have to like it. You have to like the colors. I know people who won't buy a pattern because it's in colors they don't like.
Yeah.
And you need to train yourself to look past the colors in the pattern, but what is the pattern? Especially with counted canvas. The photo that I sent you of the little purple piece,
Mm-hmm.
Gary,
yeah,
that was the ugliest thing I had ever seen when I picked up the pattern. It was moss. It was done on sage green canvas in moss greens and these dirty reds. And in the center of that piece was this stump ugly red ceramic button.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of the age of the pattern, I knew I was never going to be able to find the button in the first place.
right?
So it was okay. But I loved the pattern. It had pulled work in it on canvas. And it was like, yes.
Yep.
And it had this really cool border that she had done with an overdyed. Another big yes for me.
Yeah.
And I bought the pattern, put it away, and one day was going through and went, I had a piece of the lilac colored canvas, and I went to my collection of Karen threads, and I went through it, and I went, I went, oh, when I came across the thread called Yellow Fever.
Mm-hmm.
Purple, orange, yellow, and green. And I was off. I pulled the purple pearl cottons to do the rest of it. I had the lime green beads that I needed in the piece. And in the middle, I did silk ribbon tulips in orange.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I've done that on other pieces. There'll be one part. Well, Needle Delights. She had a series of logs based on a log cabin. I loved her boo logs. I love the colors she used in it. But in the center, she just backstitched the word boo, and I went, yuck. I went and found this really cool black cat button from Just Another Button Company. And it fit beautifully in the middle.
Well, let's stop real quick, because I think the piece you're talking about with the tulips. Okay, so I think that has a little to do with color theory and having a DMC color card and a color wheel. So when you think of, the purple, is orange is the complement, right? Or is it yellow? Yellow. So it's one off from, I don't have my color wheel in front of me, but that's what it is. So purple, it's yellow. So if you have that color wheel and you scooch it over to that, now it was in your over dyes, but people were probably thinking, well, why didn't she do the tulips in purple? Because it's all purple. I mean, the orange looks perfect. And I think, but that has to do with color theory, don't you think? Why you chose that orange instead of maybe a purple?
There was, and looking at the balance of the piece. Mm-hmm. One, I did want the middle to be somewhat of a focal point. But the other thing, there was a lot of purple because all of the squares that are pulled work out around it are done in purple. The outlining of those squares is in purple. So I needed something else. And part of it was I had silk ribbon in the right colors to do that. I had the right greens and I had the right oranges.
And it does just pop on the canvas. It does focus. You look at the border, you look around at the pulled work stitches, but your eye goes back to the center with the tulips in the orange, and that, so bravo, well done.
And what helps that is, excuse me, I'm getting it out of the closet. Is the border out around it is just a simple slanted stitch done in the overdyed.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps draw your eye into that middle.
I'll be sure and include this photo in all the things that we put up so people can see it. But see, this this all gets back to one of my great pet peeves is HGTV, and Marga watches it all the time, and she enjoys it. She gets ideas from that, and we're remodeling a half bath at the moment that with ideas, and and it works out great. But the part that annoys me is people buying a house. And they walk in, and there's a blue wall. Oh, I can't live here. I can't. Not that blue wall. Paint it. I can't. Oh, these doors have panels on them. I have to have a solid door. Change them. And you think nothing. You're not buying the blue wall or the doors or the colonial windows or I don't know all the terms, and I really don't care. You're not. That's not what you're buying. You're buying a structure that fits your style of living and gives you the space and the flow. And in many ways, when you buy a design, that's what you're buying. You're buying the house, and then how you paint the walls and how you decorate it is your business. And to me, it's the same kind of thing. And then so you take that approach and say, all right, like when you said, how many people don't buy a chart because they don't like the colors. Well, that same thing with a house. If they're all yellow walls, but you like the house, then paint them. Change the colors, and get your color wheel out and go to work. Yeah,
I think and it's a fear, don't you think, of changing those things? I think that's what I hear the most. That people are. When we're discussing this EGA class. It's like, oh, I don't like these colors, but I don't want to change them. I'm afraid to change them. And so we kind of went through some suggestions like, okay, so go to the big box. There's not a lot of needlework stores around, so go to the big box stores and look and see which DMC colors you like. I forgot about saying, do you have a DMC color card, which is the easiest way to do it, because there they are, grouped together, because you're going to need a dark and a medium, I think, for colors in 2 different shades. But look at the colors, look at what's available, and pick the colors you like, and then think about a color wheel. Think about what would look good next to each other, what looks good together. I think a color wheel is important, and as is the DMC color card,
And the one with the actual threads on it.
Over the fear.
I'm sorry?
It also helps you get over the fear of changing the color, because you can see, what's a triangular, what's a tetradic, what are contrasting. And the DMC color card I use in a variety of ways. One, if I don't have a thread in a shade I want, I find the closest DMC color, and then I can contact a shop and say, I'm looking for neon rays, and it needs to be close to this DMC color.
Right.
Yeah.
I've taken skeins with me when I'm clothing shopping, because I'm looking for something to match something. And it's easier than trying to bring the piece of clothing. I talk to my mother in DMC colors when we're discussing her quilts.
The universal language,
Because
that
it's
DMC.
something we both have in common, and we can visually see this is what we're talking about.
No, I mean, I'm terrible at colors, and I have the DMC, the threaded DMC chart, and I'm amazed at how often I have that thing out. And I mean, I'm just awful at it, but it is such a good tool to have. When changing colors or trying, like if you got an anchor thread or a DMC thread, and you want to try an anchor or an over dye or something, boy, it's so valuable.
Right.
The other thing too is that there are a lot of conversion charts out there available. Rainbow Gallery used to do a bunch for their different threads, and they would list the DMC color that it was closest to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I found that for my Yuki beads and something else recently that I was kind of surprised. But it made it so much easier, because I have these threads, and now I can see what color it's going to be.
Yep. When you're choosing colors, Robin, do you have a comfort zone that you like to stay in, or do you stretch yourself?
It depends on my mood.
I knew that was the answer. It depends. I knew that.
It depends.
It all depends. I look at it this way. I say, what's talking to me today?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a pattern that has an overdyed, I pull out my overdyes and I start looking and what's grabbing my attention. In solids, I'll tell you the colors I tend not to use a lot, unless I'm stitching penguins, are black and white and gray and red. I don't do much with red because it's a color I can't wear. I will put it in pieces, and I do have a nice selection of red threads. And on a painted canvas, that doesn't bother me. Red is fine, But other than that, anything is open. My favorite color is paisley, but that's another story. I do a lot with the blue greens and the green blues.
Uh-huh.
Pink, any shade of pink. Green to me, I treat as a neutral because Mother Nature puts it with everything. I have no fear of using oranges and yellows and the hot colors, the cool colors. It doesn't matter. They're all good, as a friend of mine says.
That interests me that you'll use pinks, but you don't really care to use reds.
Yeah, burgundy is wonderful. Any shade of pink, because those are colors I can wear.
Okay.
But a true red, no. I stitch pieces with them. I do. It's my mother's favorite color.
But not for you.
I will stitch. Red, no problem. And like I say, on a painted canvas, that doesn't bother me. Red is fine on a painted canvas. Painted canvases, those need to speak to me. The canvas itself has to be a design I really like. Part of that is the expense. They're not cheap.
Right. They aren't.
Whereas with a counted canvas, it's the pattern. It has nothing to do with the colors. It's the pattern. Because chances are I'm going to change the colors.
So that is almost an automatic with counted canvas for you?
I've done a few Debbie Rowley ranks up there as someone who I will half the time do her colors.
Okay.
I've done 2 of hers in exactly her colors because I fell in love with them.
Mm-hmm.
Needle Delights is another one. The interesting thing with Needle Delights, on a lot of her patterns, she gives you other colorways. And so sometimes I'm not doing the primary, but I'm doing one of her other colorways because it speaks to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and her pieces are so unique because they use a lot of over dyes together, and she just does such a good job of combining those. That's what makes those so much fun, I think.
Yep. Her Tuscan Sunset, I used one of her, I don't think it was the primary, I think it was one of the alternatives. And again, she probably had 8 to 10 different overdyes in it. I just finished her Bora Bora because it took me a while to find all the threads. That was one that I wanted to do in her original colorway because it just screamed. It was bright turquoise, yellows, orange, lime green. It was all these hot tropical colors.
Now, Beth, you'll red. I mean, red for you is yeah, you're all about it. But do you find yourself staying in a comfort zone, or do you try to stretch?
I tend to stay in a comfort zone when it comes. I was looking at the canvases that I've done where I've changed the colors, and I tend to stay towards like the teal or turquoisey blue, and then a green to magenta colorway. And I'm just thinking, I tend to stay there because that's where I'm comfortable picking colors. Even though I'll change things to red in cross stitch, I don't do it as much in needlepoint for some reason. And I don't know why that is. Maybe because it's harder. Red does scream at you. So if you put red in something, your eye goes to it. So you have to be careful where you use it because it will draw your eye immediately.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at my needlepoint pieces that I've stitched where I've changed the colors, and I tend towards one side of the color wheel. I don't go to the orange, yellow, red field when I change colors. If I'm doing something in an analogous color scheme. In fact, I'm looking at something now and I'm thinking, oh, those colors, that would be nice for my new project. I'm going to have to find these threads and these colors. But yeah, I tend to stay the same.
Yeah.
And you, do you stay pretty much blues?
Oh, I do. I mean, it's, and I know it's 60 some odd years, 67 years of just being a failure at colors, that the blue world is, I'm comfortable there. I see it well. So I said on a previous podcast the other, when I was putting together some threads, it was for this Botany Bay thing, and I needed a green. And so I pulled out some greens, and I went to Margaret and I said, I need to match, here's a whole bunch of variations that are close. I need to match this one as close as possible. Help me pick it out. And there were like 8 different skeins. And she looked down and she picked up one skein and she said, well, this one's red, so this is out. And, and here I am at 68 years old. And so I took it over to the window, and sure enough, it was red, but in standard room light, it started to become a green to me. And so, yeah, it just, I think it, quite frankly, I'm sure it just scares me, and it's a childhood trauma thing, Jumbo 8 crayons. I had to memorize them to get through school without being laughed at. And so I end up blues. That's where I end up almost all the time, unless someone helps me. And because I can see the colors, but I'm afraid. I'm sure it is. If I sat down with a psychologist, that's all it would come out is I'm simply afraid to go elsewhere because I know I'm going to get tripped up. And so I stay in the blues. I'm fine. Thank you.
And I find, well, with your color blindness, that's understandable. But the other thing is that the members of my A&G chapter know that they can come to Cindy or I with when they want to change colors.
Mm-hmm.
Because we just see things differently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I look at patterns and see potential, for colors first. It's like I'm sitting here and I realize I've done white work samplers. I've never stitched them all in white. I'll sneak in a little over-dyed, very subtle lots of times, but I'll sneak in some over-dyed silk or a little touch of color.
Yep. And see, and I'm sure that's why white work appeals to me, always has, because I can just enjoy the texture and the technique and the process, and color is a non-factor. And I remember one time I don't remember what design it was of Debbie Rowley's, and when I looked at it, I thought, ooh, blacks, grays, and whites would be beautiful with this design. So I bought all the threads and spec'd it all out, blacks, grays, and whites. And I was having some conversation with her, and she said, "Don't you need a color in there? You need like a red or something." And she's probably right, but no, in my mind, no, I'm good. Just, a black and white photo is fine with me. I'm okay. Yeah.
And yet one of her diamond delights was whites, creams, and gold.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I stitched it in shades of pink.
Mm.
From pale all the way to screaming magenta.
Excellent.
Yeah. No, it's colors. Yeah, but that's like you said, like you and Cindy. Now, some people and some of those designers out there, how did you make those colors work? And they do because they just see it. Gay Ann Rogers is one of my favorites. She just sees these colors and knows how to make them work, and just way over my head. Yeah.
Well,
Orna Willis.
Oh, there's
yes.
one. Oh.
Yes.
How does she do that? Time after time after time. Oh.
Yes. She had a free pattern on her website for a while called Molecules of Fiber, and I was intrigued by it. So I went and pulled the overdyes that she was using. And I remember standing in the shop looking at them going, this is either going to be really cool or it's going to be stump ugly. And it turned out to be just really cool once I got into it.
It just blows me away every time. She puts together colors that, what are you doing? And there they are. Perfect. Yep.
Yeah. Just a great color. Yeah, great color sense. Well, and the other thing I was thinking about too is for people who are afraid of color, is it Trish Burr's Color Confidence?
Mm-hmm.
That she has silk shading, but she has the DMC colors stitched together. So she's already done the hard work. She knows it's like, okay, these colors go together. So taking a baby step, saying, okay, well, I like this color combination that she used in the silk shading. I'm going to use these DMC colors. I'm going to translate them into different threads maybe and use them as my jumping off point for a needlepoint piece. Because she's already done that hard work. She's looked at the, they work because you can see it. She's done it. And, I was just thinking of even trying that with this piece that I'm going to do. I'm like, I'm not sure what colors I want to use. So maybe I'll go look through that book and see if any of those color combinations jump out at me. Because this piece doesn't call for an overdye. And if it was an overdyed, that would be easy. You'd pick an overdyed that you loved and go pick the threads backwards from that, pulling from it. But
can you sneak an overdyed in?
I haven't really checked out the pattern. Maybe like in the centerpiece, there's crescents that she puts in some sort of metallic shiny thread. And I was thinking of changing that thread anyway. So it's like, maybe that would be a good place to put it too. I don't know. Most of the other places, part of is to learn how to shade, go from dark to light and then back out to dark again. I think is part of this project. So
the other thing that works well also is to do just a pencil drawing of whatever it is, and then get out your colored pencil. And the pencil drawing, most of our printers, you can make copies. So you can make several copies of it and then start coloring in to see what plays well next to each other.
Yes.
Do you want high contrast? Do you want it more subtle? I did a color class for our chapter. I've done it twice because we've had newer members come in. And one of the things we do is we take just some basic quilt blocks. And I tell them, okay, here's you need to do a triadic colorway. So 3 colors, using your color wheel. And your primary color in this pattern needs to be, and then I will assign purple, or it's usually colors that the people at the table don't like to stitch in, to get them over that little hurdle.
Yeah, and it's painless. You're not spending as much time as if you're using threads, and you have to rip it back out because it doesn't work. It's just pencil and paper and a little time.
All right, going to shift gears here.
Okay.
Robin, when you sent items for us to talk about, one of the statements you made was esoteric techniques and why it's important to teach them. What do you mean by that?
I do a lot of techniques that are no longer mainstream, although one of them, Swedish weaving, is making a resurgence. My Tenerife lace, which I talked about in July, even black work isn't that common anymore. My philosophy is this, and I started teaching these techniques because that's the only way they're going to be preserved. And I will do a class for just one person.
Uh-huh.
That is not an issue to me. So I have a small guest towel that I designed a Swedish weaving pattern for. And when I'm designing to teach, I'm distilling it down to the basic elements, the basic stitches for that particular technique. There were 3 that I found very common in Swedish weaving. There were 3 foundation stitches that I found in pulled work. Pattern darning, it's a straight stitch. So there it's more just about the technique and how fun it can be.
Yeah.
The filet lace, the biggest part there really isn't the filling. It's about how to set up the fabric to get that open grid that you need to then stitch on. But it's important to teach these techniques. The chicken scratch that I do.
Yeah.
If you don't continue to teach them, whether it's in your guild or through, Cindy and I have taught through the local libraries. We also are teaching now through one of the recreation departments in a local city here. Just get it out there, get it seen. The other thing with that, too, is if you have a county or the state fair like we do here in Iowa, and they have categories for needlework, put your pieces in so other people can see what's out there, what can be done. There is a Swedish weaving category in counted thread in that division. There is a pulled work category, hard hanger, as well as multiple categories in the cross stitch division. That's its own division.
Yeah.
Mixed techniques, where you're doing multiple things. The purple piece that we talked about earlier, that went into the category, the class of mixed techniques, because it was pulled work, needlework, beading, and then I had the silk ribbon in there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's important to keep these things alive, and you look back in history, and when people haul out these 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century pieces and dissect them and figure out how they stitched them, and you really wonder how much needlework technique, stitches, approaches, whatever, has been lost through history. And the internet has just opened up so many worlds for us in terms of sharing. And I love when people put together books. I don't care how narrow the topic, but just to document a technique or an approach or a style that could be lost forever, just because the people who did it eventually die and then nobody's carried it on.
I think one of the neatest things that DMC ever did was re-releasing that encyclopedia of work by Thérèse de Dilmont.
Yeah.
There are so many techniques in there. I go through it. I was looking for something in it the other day, and I went, I forgot that was in here. Oh, that is so cool.
That's the thing. Yeah, that stuff doesn't get old. It's old, but it doesn't get old. It still works.
She has some beautiful hem stitching bands in there. She even had macrame. A whole section on macrame.
Yep.
Which is coming back.
Yes.
I know. And I mean, because I did macrame. It's a fun.
In the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Who didn't?
Those plant hangers and those owls. I could whip up an owl so quick. But the other interesting thing to me is the lace work, like the reticella and like you were saying, and learning people are really curious how to do the hem stitch, because they realize on the antique samplers, some of them, that's how they finish the edges. And so there's been kind of a resurgence on, well, how is that done? You hear inquiries about that one. It's fun to do the drawn thread, to pull. It's kind of scary the first time you do it, when you cut your threads and you pull them out and then you add stitches in. But there's something, it just looks so beautiful once you've done it.
The effect of those techniques is stunning. It really is. And I have a few antique pieces, some of which I bought for inspiration, and some just because they were too beautiful to pass up, with a lot of that work in it. And they were done on regular cloth. They weren't done on anything that you can easily count.
No. Yeah. My mom has hanging in the guest room where I stayed, the lace that I think it was my aunt's made. And it was made with, my mom says it was made with cotton flour sacks because they didn't have any money. And it's just beautiful. Mm-hmm. And they just carefully withdrew the threads and then did this beautiful lace work within it. And I remember them trying to teach me. They only spoke Spanish. They spoke a little English, and I spoke a little Spanish. So it was a very interesting class. And I still have that piece where they taught me how to withdraw the threads and then re-stitch those little stitches in there. And a very fond memory of sitting there and laughing because we couldn't understand each other and just having a great time. But, if we don't teach those techniques, they're going to go, you're right, they're going to go away.
Robin, when you're teaching, what advice can you offer people who are taking classes to get the most out of the class? Where do people fall short? What do you wish they would do to maximize the class? Is it follow up afterwards? Is it asking questions and not being afraid to ask questions? Where do people really miss out?
Always ask questions and don't be afraid. You're there to learn, and the teacher is aware of that. One of the things that we find, that Cindy and I both found most challenging sometimes, is just getting the needle threaded. Because especially like with the Swedish weaving, where I'm working with a size 5 pearl cotton on a towel that has a 14 count linen insert, Aida band insert. The hardest thing there was for people to see the floats and to understand what that was. And so what I will do there is go around and with my needle pick up to show them, and then turn the piece over so that they see the needle hasn't gone through the fabric. Mm-hmm. And there isn't another good way to do that other than with a small group.
Yeah.
And go to several groups if it's a large class. The other big challenge, we get people who are true beginners in reading the pattern. So there it's just a lot of personal attention. It's walking around. It's seeing what each one is doing. It's encouraging, offer encouragement. And I find that you'll have some people in the class who get it right away. It just comes naturally to them. And then there are others who struggle. And for a lot of them, I find it struggle to understand the pattern and to read the pattern.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we had that problem teaching needlepoint at the library. Some ladies they were just getting it. And then others, they were like, okay, wait a second, you're confusing me. So you had to back up and try a different method. So for yourself, do you like taking classes, or do you like learning from a book, or do you just pop in YouTube and watch a good YouTube?
I don't do much with YouTube, other than watching Fiber Talk, because I love seeing the photos they get put up and oohing and eyeing over those. I can go either way. It really depends on what it is. Most of the techniques that I do, though, I learned because I took a class. It was something that piqued my interest, and I went and took a class. From there, I can go to a book, but I am more of a visual learner, so I need really good diagrams and pictures. And that's why Janice Love's Hardanger books are so wonderful in my world. She has wonderful designs and talks you written as well as the pictorial. I can be a little spatially challenged sometimes, so a written description is not always the best way for me to go.
Yeah, that whole how people learn thing is so critical and at the core of any class. It doesn't matter what it is. And good teachers are the ones who realize that you need to offer the basically the three different ways that people learn as a package, so everybody in the class can benefit. And if you can identify the students who are visual learners, you can get them over a hump in a hurry, or people who just read, just hand them the stuff, they'll figure it out. Just get out of their way. But yeah, it's so critical in any kind of teaching, is understanding that and identifying the students and then having that approach. And it's a challenge. That's a challenge as a teacher to also be able to offer either a verbal description or images or the written word, and make sure you offer all of that. Yeah, it's so critical.
In the Swedish weaving that I taught recently, I knew with the charting software that Cindy has, because she does my charting for me, she was not going to be able to put the arrows in to show the direction the needle needed to travel to execute some of the basic stitches. But the classroom had a whiteboard. So I put the hash marks up for the floats, and then with another color, I indicated with an arrow. I drew the stitch and put the arrow. So they knew which way their needle needed to be going to do the serpentine stitch, to do a loop stitch. And a couple of the women in the class took a pencil and on the pattern drew in the arrows so they would have a reminder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, make notes. Make notes. Right. So when you go home and the teacher isn't there. Yep. Yeah.
Well, one of the things is that Cindy and I both put our emails out. We also let people know that we're going to be stitching in public at the following places whenever. And we encourage them, if you have a problem, come and find us. Get in touch with us, and we'll make arrangements to go get together with you. Where we're both retired, we can do that.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
You know, that's the other thing, too, is to let them understand that once we get you started on this, we're not going to cast you adrift.
Yeah.
You still have a lifeline if you need it.
You guys have both
and
done...
my greatest satisfaction...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
My greatest satisfaction as a teacher is having them come back with the piece finished.
You guys have both done some form of stitch in public. What is that experience like?
It can be a lot of fun. You need to be a little outgoing, not afraid to talk to people, to strangers when they walk up. I'm notorious for seeing someone stand off a little ways, but staring at what we're doing. So I'll look up, smile, and then wave them over. Come see. Get a better look. There are some times where I don't get a lot of stitching done. I do a lot of talking. But it's helping to foster this art form that I am passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as soon as they say, well, I just do cross stitch, I say, we all started there, or we started with this. And we laugh and we call cross stitch is our gateway drug.
Right. Right. And I think people sometimes are afraid to try something, just a little different, just a little more difficult. And so if you kind of give them a little nudge, it's kind of fun to see their eyes open up and say, oh, wait, I can do this. This isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And get them
most
going
of
on something.
Techniques, when you break them down step by step, they're not difficult. And I found that techniques that I used for other things, blanket stitch and buttonhole stitch, things like that. I've used that in so many other techniques that I've done.
Yeah, that's what I love about this hobby is people will say, well, I just do cross stitch. There's try some other techniques because it will make you a better cross stitcher, but it just opens up so many different avenues to explore that. And I think it's one of those where if you do different techniques, I think you improve overall. And you can't always say that about other activities. That this is one where if you do other stitches, it'll help you better understand how threads behave. And when you go back to your favorite technique, whatever it is, I think you're a smarter and better stitcher for it.
Yeah, taking hard hanger and learning to get over my fear of cutting fabric after I'd done all the stitches made it so much easier to go do hem stitching, to do the drawn thread work. to do the reticella and the fillet work.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, okay, now I've got to cut these threads out. No big deal anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big hurdle right there. Cutting the ground cloth. Yep.
It is massive. It is a massive hurdle. I broke out in a cold sweat and my hands shook.
Yep.
And I had to get up and calm myself because there was Linda Driscoll, who was my teacher for Hardanger, standing at the head of the class saying, you can do this. It's not as scary as you think it is.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I remember the first time I cut it, I was convinced the whole ground cloth was just going to unravel right in my hands. There's no way this is staying together. Yeah. Yep.
Right.
It did. It works. And then when people say, even if you cut the wrong thing, it's okay, you can repair it. Fortunately, I've never had to do that, but holy smokes, that's, yeah.
Oh, I just had to do it recently. I clipped a corner on a piece of Hardanger with a blanket stitch corner, so I had to go back and very carefully restitch.
Rescue it. Yep.
Yep.
All right, let's end it right here. This was fun. We got to do more of this. So, Robin, thanks so much for doing this, and hopefully people gained a little something, if nothing else, a little confidence to go out and do some experimenting. So thanks, Robin, for making the time, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thanks.
Thank you.